But I want to say this about misinformation. What misinformation? What is it exactly that we peddle for money here on the High Wire? We were one of the first ones to report to you that it looked like this virus came from a lab in Wuhan. For saying that, we lost our YouTube channel and our Facebook channel. But if you've turned on your television at all in the last year, it is clear that almost every decent scientist in the world, including the FBI, are saying it appears this virus came from a lab. So who got it right? We did. We told you from the very beginning, before one single person ever received this vaccine outside of the trials, that the trials had shown that they had no idea whether it would stop transmission or not. We said that the misinformation is coming from mainstream news that is telling you it's 95% effective at stopping you from getting the virus, and therefore you are protecting everyone around you. We called bull crap on that. And we were right. Everyone knows it. If you've gotten the vaccine and you're watching the show, you know you caught COVID after getting the vaccine. In fact, we've shown you that there's negative efficacy now. All the science shows that after about 14 or 15 weeks, not only does the vaccine not protect you, it makes you more likely to catch COVID over and over and over again. That was called misinformation. To say that the vaccine didn't stop transmission was misinformation. It's a lie. It's going to stop this pandemic. Now it's called endemic because it's never going away, because everyone that got the vaccine is now keeping us from being able to end the reign of the COVID virus. We also told you we believed that there were going to be long-term dangers, short-term and long-term dangers. We talked about blood clots. We talked about myocarditis. We talked about strokes and brain swelling and cancers. All of that was said to be misinformation. This is just like every other vaccine. It's perfectly safe, totally effective. It can do no harm whatsoever. I said to you, can you imagine how stupid you would think it would look if you drove down the road and saw a billboard that said, drugs are safe and effective? Your brain would immediately go, wait, hold on a second. I mean, all drugs? Even drugs that haven't been approved yet? Are we talking about Fen-Phen and Vioxx and Oxycontin and all the drugs that are being discontinued because they do so much harm? Are we saying that, no drug in the future is ever going to be dangerous? I mean, everyone knows. What about all those side effects I hear at the end of every commercial for every drug? We would say it's preposterous to make a statement that drugs are safe and effective, yet we've made that claim for vaccines. Well, folks, that claim is crashing down. In fact, I said just a week or two ago, we're seeing commercials for vaccines now, and guess what you're hearing? May cause injury at the end of the commercial, because there's no such thing as a perfectly safe product. And now, based on headlines that came out this week, the misinformation that myocarditis, pericarditis, blood clots, and strokes could be increased by vaccines, well, here's the headline. Daily Mail, largest COVID vaccine study ever, finds shots are linked to small increased risk of neurological, blood, and heart disorders, but they're still extremely rare. Look at how hard they work at that. Small and extremely rare in the same sentence. This is the New York Post. COVID vaccines linked to slight increases in heart, brain, blood disorders, study shows. Slight, small, rare. Well, how rare? How small? How was the study done? What are we talking about? Well, the Daily Mail puts out a graph, so this is what they consider small. That to have a almost 400% increased risk of swelling of the brain and spinal cord, that's just from the first dose of Moderna. I guess 4 times the risk is a small risk. Blood clots from AstraZeneca, 3.23 times. Not a 20% risk, a 320% risk increase of blood clots. Guillain-Barré syndrome, which could lead to paralysis, 2.49 times. With the AstraZeneca, myocarditis from Pfizer in the first dose, 2.7 times. Myocarditis from Moderna, 3.48 times. Pericarditis, 1.7 times, just with 1 dose of Moderna. Myocarditis from Pfizer in the second dose, 2.8. Oh, here's a really small one. Myocarditis from the second shot of Moderna, 6 times the risk of myocarditis in your child that had 0 risk from dying of COVID. but a 6 times risk of swelling their heart, which will permanently damage them forever. Another small one. Look at this. AstraZeneca, only 6 to almost 7 times the amount of pericarditis if you got that vaccine, and the 3rd dose if you didn't, compared to if you didn't get it at all. Myocarditis, Pfizer, 3rd dose, 2 times. Pericarditis, Moderna, 4th dose, 2.6 times. Myocarditis from the 3rd dose, 2 times. And they're not even talking about cancer, which we've been reporting on. But how about this? You're like, well, I mean, only 6 times the amount of myocarditis. But if you add that 6 times to the 2 or 3 times for myocarditis, and what about the blood clots and stroke? And that's, I mean, what happens? They're not just 6 by themselves. They all stack up. What are we, like 20 times? 20 times the amount of risk for getting totally jacked up by this vaccine? And they're only just starting the list, and trust me, the scientists did everything they could to make this as conservative as they possibly could. Because no one wants to be responsible for, God forbid, saying we need to recall a vaccine. Now, I think this paragraph from the New York Post says it all. It shows how far we've come here at the work we're doing with ICANN. Possible safety signals when they looked at this for transverse myelitis. That's, by the way, folks, that's polio. Transverse myelitis would have been paralysis in the body, which back in the polio days, if you had transverse myelitis, you were paralyzed with polio. This is what is happening from this vaccine. A spinal cord inflammation. There you go. Wow, sounds like polio. It is, folks. They've just changed the definitions. Were identified after viral vector vaccines, as was acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, the inflammation and swelling in the brain and spinal cord. Oh, so all it does is put me at risk for swelling my brain and swelling my spinal cord. Line me up, man. Line starts behind me. After both viral vector and mRNA vaccines, the researchers found. Okay, so what's just happened? What's just happened is you've finally been told some truth, though it's small. It's a rare moment of truth from the pharmaceutical industry. And of course, they don't like this study, but there's nothing they can do about it. But what did we just find out? A vaccine we were told is perfectly safe. In fact, on Fox News, Dr. Siegel will tell you, well, still, it's rare. You should go out and get it because it's better to have those issues than to worry about what the virus could do to you. Well, we have no idea how good that comparative study would be, but what we know is there's this rare risk. It's rare. It's rare that your heart is going to stop, though we see people dying suddenly everywhere we look. We all know somebody now. The recent study shows that 50% of people believe they know somebody that probably died from the COVID vaccine. And so what does the word rare mean? Because before COVID, in the middle of COVID, we told you there would be these side effects. It was misinformation. Now it's not misinformation. So why don't we go back a few decades? Vaccines don't cause autism. Really? Interesting. Because you just admitted that this vaccine can swell the brain. You do realize that all autism is a symptom that comes from having a brain swelling event. It's a side effect of your child's brain swelling too big inside of their skull, and then finally it comes down and they're never quite the same again because they have some form of brain damage. For others, it may be Tourette's is the symptom that they end up with, or maybe schizophrenia. All of these things that can happen once your brain swells in your brain. So we now know the COVID vaccine can swell your brain. They have to admit it. And they've done more studies on this vaccine than any vaccine in history, because finally there were scientists allowed to ask the right questions. So now that we know that vaccines can and do sometimes rarely swell brains, can we get back to a conversation about something else that's rare? I mean, if it's just rare, then it's okay, right? It's okay that some people are going to die from heart attacks from this vaccine. It's rare. It's just a small group. We killed them. We know. But it's just a part of the reality we live in. We had to do it. Well, what about autism? Autism's rare. For a while, it was super rare. It was 1 in 10,000. Then eventually, after the vaccine program started to increase, maybe it's not vaccines, maybe it's other things. Who knows? We should be looking at it. But it goes to 1 in 250. And then 1 in 150. and then 1 in 125, and 110, and 88, and 68, and 69, 1 in 59, 1 in 54. Recently, 1 in 44. Some studies saying it's more like 1 in 34. Is that rare? Sure, it is. 1 in 34 kids will never have a normal life, really. It's rare, though, so don't worry about it. Odds that your child is going to be one of those 1 in 44 or 1 in 35, it's rare. Don't worry about it. We know for a fact vaccines don't do it. Just like we knew for a fact that vaccines don't cause myocarditis or blood clots or brain swelling. You see, we've shown you time and time again, they have no science to make any of those points. And when you actually start doing science that you're allowed to do, you find out that, oh my God, as it turns out, the industry that's making billions of dollars off of their own products, that are doing their own safety studies, were lying to us. What? You're kidding me. They didn't tell us the truth about their product they planned on making billions of dollars from? The veil has been lifted. The king has no clothes. And now we are looking at the truth. And now you've got to ask yourself what you're going to do with it. Because what we're going to talk about for the rest of this show could spell the fate of mankind. Our silence could be our doom. Coming up in this show, I'm going to talk about this. This is right here. These are some form of white blood clot. This came from a young child. Obviously, at this point when it was removed, they had already died. I'm going to talk to the embalmer that had to pull this out of that child's body. I'm going to talk to a man who decided to put out a poll of all the embalmers around the world. What do they say? Is there anything to this 150,000 excess deaths in the United States of America just last year? Above, COVID's over, why are people still dying? We're going to get to the truth of the matter. It's going to be heavy, it's going to be serious, and you're going to have to ask yourself, do you really think your government is protecting you, or are they putting you in grave danger?